It was supposed to be a typical day. The children were at school. Mark was at work, and I was home, finishing up a few chores. I had always prided myself on maintaining a sense of order in my life, even when everything else seemed chaotic. But that day, my perfect little world would crumble, and nothing would ever be the same again. It started with a small, seemingly insignificant moment. I was cleaning out a drawer in the living room when I found an old, withered envelope. The handwriting on it was familiar. It was my father-in-law's. For a moment, I wondered why I had never noticed it before, why it had never been opened. Something inside me urged me to open it, even though I knew it wasn't mine to touch. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that feeling you get when you sense something is wrong. Either way, I opened it. Inside the envelope was a letter. At first, I thought it was just a regular note. But as I began to read, the words began to blur together, my vision clouded by the growing realization of what I was reading. The letter, written by my father-in-law, was not a simple note. It was a confession that shattered everything I had believed about my family. In it, he described how he had been living a double life. For years, he had been secretly abusing me. It had started when I had first moved in with Mark and his parents, and over time, his behavior had escalated. At first, it was subtle, small comments here and there that made me uncomfortable. But over the years, it grew into something far worse. I could hardly believe what I was reading. My mind raced with confusion and disbelief. The man I had trusted, the man who had treated me like a daughter, had been hiding this dark, monstrous side of himself. How could this have happened? How could I have been so blind? I had always thought of him as a father figure. I had never suspected that he was capable of such cruelty. The letter didn't just end with the confession. It went on to explain how he had carefully concealed his actions from everyone, including Mark. He had used his charm and his status in the family to make sure no one would believe me if I ever spoke out. And the worst part, he had planned to continue the abuse, to keep me trapped in his web of silence. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the last line. The letter ended with a chilling message. I will do anything to keep our secret safe. No one can ever know what I've done. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The betrayal, the horror, the shock. It was all too much to process in that moment. But one thing was clear. I could no longer keep this secret. I couldn't live in this house, in this family, knowing what I knew. I had to confront Mark. I had to tell him the truth, no matter how much it tore us apart. That night, after Mark came home from work, everything felt different. The house, once warm and comforting, now felt cold and suffocating. The weight of the letter I had found earlier pressed heavily on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. But there was no turning back now. I couldn't ignore what I had learned. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. The truth had come to light, and it was time to confront Mark. He walked in through the door, as usual, smiling, asking how my day had been, his voice carrying the same warmth as always. But I couldn't respond. I could only stare at him, my mind racing. How was I supposed to look at him and pretend everything was okay? How could I continue living with him, knowing the truth about his father, Liz? He asked, sensing the shift in my demeanor. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I felt my stomach turn. How could I explain this? How could I find the words to tell him what I had discovered, knowing it would shatter everything? My voice barely came out as I said, I know everything, Mark. I know what your father did. His face instantly went pale, his eyes widening in shock. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I didn't waste time. I walked over to the desk and grabbed the letter. I handed it to him, watching as his face slowly drained of color. I saw the panic in his eyes, the fear that he had been dreading for so long. Mark took the letter in his trembling hands, his eyes darting over the words, absorbing the truth that had been hidden for so long. I waited in silence as he read, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't look away, even as my hands began to shake with fear and anger. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as the tension between us grew. When he finished reading, he dropped the letter on the table, his face a mixture of disbelief, guilt, and shame. I don't know what to say, he stammered, his voice shaky. I had no idea. I never knew. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he say that? How could he not know? His father had been living under the same roof for years, and Mark had never once suspected anything. The man he had looked up to, the man he had called a father, had been silently abusing me. And Mark was telling me he didn't know. Mark, how could you not know? I asked, my voice rising in frustration. You never suspected anything. You never thought to question why your father was always so charming, so perfect in front of everyone, but so cold and distant behind closed doors. I never saw it that way, Mark whispered, his eyes filled with tears. He was my father. I trusted him. I never thought, you never thought. I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. You never thought that maybe he was hiding something. That maybe all the things I was going through were a result of his actions. What about the times I came to you, crying, telling you something wasn't right? What about the moments when I begged you for help? Mark's eyes filled with tears as he reached out from me. Liz, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I would have done anything to protect you, to protect us. I swear, I had no idea. His words felt empty. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I couldn't. The damage had been done. The truth had been exposed. And now there was no going back. Mark, I need to know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How much did your father know about what he was doing? Was he aware of the hurt he caused? Was he aware that his actions were destroying everything? Mark took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I don't know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know if he ever realized what he was doing, but I promise you, I'll make him face it. I'll make him take responsibility for everything. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't know what to think. Could I trust him? Could I trust anyone in this family anymore? The man I had married was now a stranger to me. The love I had once felt for him had been tainted by the lies, by the secrecy, by the silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had believed in was built on a foundation of lies. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mark, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. I don't know if I can forgive you for what your father did to me, for what he's done to all of us. But I have to try, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our family. Mark nodded, his face filled with regret. I understand, he said softly, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I will not let this destroy us. But deep down, I knew the road ahead would not be easy. We were facing a battle, not just against the past, but against the truth, against the lies that had been buried for so long. But I was determined to fight. For me, for my children, for justice. The weeks following our confrontation with Mark were filled with unease and uncertainty. We had decided that the only way to move forward was to expose the truth, to confront the horrors of the past and deal with the consequences, no matter how painful. But I wasn't sure if I was ready. Was I ready to tear apart my family in pursuit of justice? Was I ready to face the truth, no matter how devastating it might be? Mark and I spent hours discussing what to do next. He was determined to confront his father, to make him face what he had done, to make him apologize for the years of abuse. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. I knew the man I had married The man I had trusted was no longer the person I thought he was, and I was afraid that, in the end, even if his father was confronted, the damage would be irreparable. One evening, Mark finally told me he was going to confront his father. "I have to do this, Liz," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "I can't live with myself knowing what he's done. I need to make him understand the pain he's caused. I need him to take responsibility." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could fix things. But I was afraid that confronting his father would only make everything worse. What if he didn't believe us? What if he denied everything? What if he continued to live in denial, refusing to acknowledge the damage he had caused? But despite my fears, I knew this was the only way forward. I couldn't let the past continue to haunt us. I couldn't let Mark continue to live in the shadow of his father's lies. The day came when Mark went to his father's house. I stayed behind, waiting anxiously for any news. I had no idea what to expect. Would it be a calm conversation, or would it turn into a confrontation, one that would leave us all broken and scarred? Hours passed, and I received no word from Mark. The silence was unbearable. I paced round the house, my mind racing with thoughts of what might be happening. Was he okay? Had his father reacted violently? Was Mark finally seeing the truth for what it was? Then, just as the sun was beginning to set, Mark returned home. He looked tired, worn down, and pale, as though he had just fought a battle, which, in many ways, he had. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood in the doorway, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and guilt in his eyes. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened, pressing down on him. He had confronted his father, but I didn't know what the outcome had been. "Mark," I whispered, my heart pounding. "What happened?" He walked into the living room, slumping down on the couch. "It didn't go how I expected," he said quietly. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge what he had done. He just kept trying to justify it, saying it was a mistake, that it wasn't as bad as I thought. I felt a lump form in my throat. "So, he still doesn't get it?" I asked, my voice breaking. "He still thinks he can get away with everything?" Mark nodded, his eyes filled with frustration. "He's a coward, Liz. He doesn't want to face the truth. He's too proud to admit that he hurt you, that he hurt us. He kept saying it was just a moment of weakness. I don't know if I can ever forgive him for what he's done." Tears welled up in my eyes as I sat down next to him. "I don't know if I can forgive him either," I said softly. "But we have to keep going, Mark. We have to make sure that he doesn't hurt anyone else. We can't let him get away with it." Mark reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I know, but it's going to be hard. I don't know if we can ever be the same again. I don't know if we can ever heal from this." I looked at him, my heart aching. "I don't know either, but we have to try. For us, for our kids. We can't let this define us. We can't let his actions destroy us." And with that, we made a decision. We would go to the authorities. We would make sure that Mark's father would face the consequences of his actions, even if he refused to take responsibility. It wouldn't be easy, but we couldn't keep living in fear. We couldn't keep letting him control our lives. The next few weeks were filled with meetings with lawyers, preparing statements, and gathering evidence. It felt like the weight of the world was on our shoulders, but we were determined. We had to do this for our family, for our future. We couldn't let the past continue to haunt us. As the days went on, Mark and I found ourselves growing closer again. We were no longer hiding from the truth. We were confronting it head-on, together. And although the road ahead would be difficult, we knew it was the only way to move forward.